Hi, everybody. Today we're going to learn how to build respect, encourage responsibility, and teach compliance right here in the Bully Proof Classroom. You know, I'm a pretty observant guy, and I watch parents with their kids all throughout my travels in stores and in malls and out in public. For some reason, I can never understand why, when a parent asks a kid to do something and they don't do it, the parent's response is always, "Well, what do you want to do?" As an example, I watched a mother the other day chasing down a kid in the mall, and the mother was almost begging the kid to come over here, come on, get over here, come on, come on. And the kid turned around and waved and waddled off. And the mother looked at the child and said, "Well, what do you want to do?" Well, does it really matter what that kid wants to do? He's probably 3 or 4 years old, and he doesn't have one bit of control over what he wants to do, or he's not supposed to. The parent does. And I think we have to really take stock of our language and how we address kids when we're trying to build respect, we're trying to encourage responsibility, and we're trying to teach compliance. And I think it's important. And I think one of the first orders of business in helping to develop respect and responsibility in our children, and if you're a teacher, and in your students, is to change our language. We have to stop asking kids what to do or asking kids to do something and tell them to do something. This is a pervasive problem that has become an issue, and we have just been too permissive in our efforts to try and control behavior. Now, I'm not a guy, who was ever in the service, but my dad was. And one of the things that I asked my father was, "What happens when you go into the service?" And he said to me, "The first thing that happens is they shave your head and they take your clothes." Two things. In other words, the service owns you at that point. And I says, "And then what happens?" He says, "Then you do what you're told. No matter what, you do what you're told." And I says, "What happens if you don't do what you're told?" He says, "You lose your freedom." He says, "If you want a furlough, you need to make sure that you are following the orders of your commanding officer." Now, when you translate that into a classroom, and I want everyone to think about this, the way it's set up today, we give a kid all the freedom, and then when they don't comply, we restrict their freedom. When in reality, it should be the other way around. We need to restrict freedom, and then we need to give them back the freedom when they do what they're told, when they're told to do it with a good attitude. And by the way, that's the definition of compliance or obedience. And sometimes teachers don't like the word obedience because sometimes they liken it to dog training. Now, I'm going to start by just showing you a triangle. And the triangle is positioned where it is narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. To me, that makes all the sense in the world when it comes down to behavior. Kids today, young children today, need to live in the tip of that triangle until they can display the qualities of compliance and respect. I mean, all you're going to do is make sure that you get compliance and respect first, then you will slowly give kids more freedom and more choice, I might add. Too often we say to kids, well, what would you like to do? What would you like to do? As that mother did in the mall. The point that I'm making here is, if you restrict freedom first and then dole it out, you'll look like the good guy. If you give them everything and then try and restrict it when they misbehave, you're going to look like the bad guy. And it's so important to understand this, because classrooms are set up based upon a reward system. And we give kids things when they do things, and often we give them things when they do things that they should be doing anyway. And if you look at behavior modification from the standpoint of a kid, most kids who are on behavior modification programs have already done so many things wrong that we start rewarding them for doing some things right. And the kid who is always doing things right looks at this and says, I'm not getting a reward for doing the things that I do which are right. Maybe I better do things that are wrong, and then when I've done them long enough, what'll happen is they'll say, they got to put me on a behavior modification program as well, so I get rewarded for doing things that are right. Young children today need to be kept in the tip of that triangle, and they need to stay there until they give you the compliance and the respect that's required. That's the first thing that we have to know. The next thing that we have to know is what happens in the middle of this triangle. In the middle of the triangle, okay, that's when we start to evaluate the kid's behavior. And we have to begin to really teach behaviors that stress respect, responsibility, and compliance. This is between the ages of about 9 and 13, right before they get into what's the adolescent stage. 9 and 13. That's also around the age of 9 where kids go into something that's called mental puberty. That's when they're going to argue with you a whole lot more, at about 9 or 10 years old. I have spoken to teachers who have worked with kids in the 4th grade who thought that some of the kids were the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the minute that they went into the 5th grade, they thought they had a different kid on their hands because the behavior was so out of control. That's when they went into mental puberty. They started to think like an adult, and that's when they started to argue with their parents and their teachers and other authority figures. But if this child is introduced and raised in the tip of the triangle, do you know what's going to happen? He is going to have a better understanding of authority, and he will be able to self-generate the behaviors of respect, responsibility, and compliance much more easily. And he, instead of arguing with adults, he is going to be ready to have strong relational interactions with adults. And at this age, we need to stress character, because the child is starting to change now from the inside out. And we have to determine what we want on the inside. We have to teach them the character qualities that are necessary for lifelong success. Let me just explain something real that's very easy to understand. Kids today function in a world where they, in order to be successful, they have to develop the qualities of respect and responsibility. compliance is generic to society. But when you think of respect, you think of people. When you think of responsibility, you think of things. And when you get down to it, there's not that much left but respect and responsibility. So we have to have the tools in place and the strategies ready to teach those two qualities to our students. If we don't, what's going to start to happen is kids will begin to believe that they can say and do whatever they want, and they can act any way that they want, and they will end up having problems with other students as well as adults. And this is when bullying starts to occur. It occurs at younger ages too, but it becomes more and more pervasive when kids are around 9, 10, 11 years old. And when the students get into middle school, that's when it really starts to go rampant and go wild, and kids start to go crazy, picking on each other, saying things to each other, acting inappropriately, and just torturing each other emotionally and verbally. So this becomes the optimal age to teach children responsibility. This becomes the optimal age to teach children about respect. This is where we expand on the respect that we introduced when the child was very young. And we can allow choices now during this time period between 9 and 13 if and only if we've gotten the compliance that we need from the child when they were younger. No compliance, no respect, they don't get the freedom that they deserve. Now, we could only hope that when the child was younger, that we instilled in them the importance of respect and compliance. But if we didn't, it is much more difficult to teach now than it would have been when they were younger. Now let's take a look at the next slide. The next slide is the bottom of the triangle. This is where kids are teenagers. And with teenagers, we're supposed to lead by the power of our relational influence. Here's one thing I want you to just keep in mind. K to 5 students and children want attention from the teacher or other adults. 6 to 12, they want attention from each other. When kids get into the adolescent years and teenage years, we want to have a relationship with them. And we want to help them develop friendships and relationships with other students and with other adults. This is where we have to be ready to teach kids how to interact with others and how to develop more powerful relationships with their friends and with other adults. You see, once compliance is established and authority is understood, we can now allow more freedom as we move to the bottom of the triangle. Now, just so you can really get a picture of this, think of a little kid and how easy it would be to control them and deal with them if, in fact, we really stuck to our guns and didn't give in to tantrums and crying and whining and all the other things that they do. But see, it's much easier with little kids to take the path of least resistance because their behavior is not all that bad. It's almost easier to deal with, but as kids get older and as they get bigger, their behavior gets worse, their attitude gets worse, and they have this ungodly ability to start to say and do things that they shouldn't be saying and doing, but they believe that they can say and do whatever they want. By the way, the manifestation of of disrespecting a student is laziness. You see, the one thing that most people don't understand is why a kid could have a very, very good experience in a classroom with one teacher and a very poor experience in a classroom with another. The relationship between the student and the teacher in the class when they're getting along, okay, is great, and the student will do all of his work. There'll be a great relationship there, and so on. The other classroom where there is no respect, and you ask the teacher, how's he doing, and they'll say to you, you know what, he doesn't do any work, he never comes to class, he's absent all the time, he's doing horrible. One teacher says he's doing great, the other one says he's doing horrible. How can two teachers have such a different opinion of the same kid? The relationship wasn't established. The manifestation of disrespect in a student is laziness. Here's my point. It's not that they won't do the work. They won't do the work for you because there's no relationship. Now, the ideal is what you just saw. Working the tip of the triangle, slowly move down the triangle, offering more freedom as respect and responsibility are manifested. But this is what we're doing right now. We give all kinds of freedom when kids are younger, and then as they get older, we try and restrain a teenager. We're doing exactly the opposite. We're offering kids, when they're young, freedom and choices and so on, and they go through their temper tantrums, the whining, and it's very easy to give in to a crying child. Always understand, when kids are younger, you have to have a goal. So if I say to you, all right, you have to get into your car seat, and you don't want to get into your car seat when you're 2 or 3 years old, your next response needs to be, are you going to get into your car seat, or is mommy or daddy going to put you in your car seat? See, the goal is always to get into the car seat at that point. Eating dinner at the dinner table. Are you going to eat dinner at the dinner table? Or am I going to have to place you at the dinner table to have dinner? See, oftentimes parents won't care. You know, and sometimes teachers in a classroom, you know, when they allow too many choices with kids that are 4 and 5 years old, well, as long as they ate dinner. Well, it's not as long as they ate dinner. See, these are the little foxes that spoil the vine that we have to be aware of. The kid takes the dish and leaves the table. He ate dinner, but did he eat dinner where you wanted him to eat dinner, or she or her to eat dinner? Where did they eat dinner? Now, when you get to the middle of the triangle, as you can see, there's no boundaries between 10 and 13 years old. They start saying and doing whatever they want. They're very argumentative. And then all of a sudden we have concern on the part of the teachers and parents regarding the child's behavior. And most people will attribute it, well, they're adolescent, they're teenagers, you know, and so on. And I could buy that to a degree, but what I can't buy is the level of disrespect and irresponsibility that I see. And the reason they're disrespectful and irresponsible, too many freedoms, too many choices, no consequences. And rebellion starts in grades 9 to 12. They don't have any self-discipline, no self-motivation, and they do not have self-control. They say what they want, do what they want. This is when maybe they could start experiencing drug and alcohol issues. This is when they go out at night and they stay out at night. This is where, you know, you can't find them. This is where they don't check in. This is where there's all manner of different things going wrong, and you don't know why. It all started when they were 2 years old. That's why you got the problem now. Then at the bottom of the triangle, you see power struggles, no character, and you certainly cannot restrain the behaviors of a rebellious teenager. Rebellious teenagers will argue, fight, and you can tell them anything you want, but if they want to do something, they're going to do it, and it doesn't matter what you say. This is why kids at the high school level walk out of class, cut classes. This is why there's power struggles and all manner of other disrespect and irresponsibility at a higher level of education at the high school. We have to begin to go back and work within the framework of that triangle. That triangle spells it out. No compliance, no respect, no freedom. Compliance and respect, you get freedom, you get choices, and as you move down that triangle, those choices will expand, and you and I are going to get along fine because I'm the one that's setting your boundaries. This is something that's easy in the beginning, but it's far tougher to do as kids get older if we don't operate in the tip of that triangle first. My name is Jim Burns. We have just learned today how to build respect, encourage responsibility, and teach compliance right here in the Bully Proof Classroom. Take care, everybody.